You most identify as an Enneagram Type 4, which for those that aren't as familiar, the Type 4 is really striving to feel significant and unique, and typically running away from anything that would be ordinary, mundane, just kind of blending in. So what about that type? And I have some specific questions, so we'll get into those, but just initially, how did you know that, oh my gosh, this is my type? I see this in myself, or I see this in how I'm running my business.
Oh, well, that was a no-brainer. I mean, I've always identified as a creative. I have always marched to the beat of my own drum. Even in high school, like if you look back at my journey as a child, I did it all. I did tap dance, I did clogging, I did gymnastics, I was a dancer, I did cheerleading, I did tennis. Oh my God, I could probably keep going. So that's kind of an example of me being a four, right? Like I just want to try it all on and I don't want to like fit into this mold. Even with my friend groups, I was friends with all the different kind of, cliques in high school. I didn't want to be in just one clique. I was kind of like my own lone wolf. And then I was friends with all the groups of people. So as soon as I learned about the Enneagram and I came up a four, I was like, oh yeah, of course I'm a four. And the deep rooted like desire to be seen, and not just seen, and I don't want to use the word admired because that can sound egotistical, but to be seen and valued as someone who is bringing a unique offering to the world is 100% me, like without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah. Yeah, I very much identify as a four.
And not to be stereotypical, but the first time I got on a Zoom with Tiffany, I was like, oh my gosh, your backdrop. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it, but I'll share some clips on YouTube. It's gorgeous. It's like so put together, so clean, just
Mm,
aesthetically pleasing, which can very much be a gift of a four. They
yes.
have that eye, they can feel that. What I thought would be fun is, because I have you here and you are so kind of, you know, in touch with yourself and understanding of the Enneagram, I thought we could go through some qualities of the Type 4,
Yeah.
and then you could share how you see them show up for yourself and in your
Mhm.
business. So
Yes.
I'm going to run through some of the strengths that the
Okay.
Type 4 has. One of them is this ability to understand kind of the emotional
Mm,
vibe of the room, of
mhm,
the group, and the interactions, and are really aware of team dynamics, client
mhm.
group, community dynamics. How do you see that showing up for you personally?
Ooh, yeah, I think that's one of my superpowers. So I 100% can walk into a scenario and recognize if someone's feeling a little off, a little uncomfortable, a little XYZ. And I know I'm an empath to a degree as well, but prior to being a business owner, I was a creative director and I produced these massive photo shoots with artists like John Legend and Elton John and these types of people who, their energy was really important for the flow of the day, the results of the photography and the videos that we were doing. And so I didn't recognize it at the time because I didn't even know what an Enneagram was back then, but I had a superpower to walk into that room and be able to kind of like suss out, okay, how's everybody feeling and how do I bring the energy up or how do I bring it down or whatever needs to happen, however I need to like turn this dial to make sure that we're all going to have a really successful and creative photo shoot. So now I see that that is definitely a four. And of course, now running a team, it plays a factor. And even working with my clients, it comes into play just because I can usually kind of read what's going on. I mean, I have a client I'm meeting with today, actually, and like our last two sessions, we kind of canceled and rescheduled, and I could tell that her head was not in a good spot. And I was like, you know what? I know you're like processing. So I said to her, do you want to postpone? And she was like, oh my gosh, yes. And I think that's because I was able to she wasn't going to tell me, hey, Tiff, I'm having a hard time, but I could sense it. I was like, something feels just a little bit off. And I'd rather meet with you when you've had some more time to do some internal, you know, thinking and come to the table feeling really ready to process whatever you discover.
Okay.
So,
And I just think that, and for those of us who maybe don't identify as a type 4, that is definitely something that I would like to get better. I know it'll never be a superpower, but just understanding exactly just that call, not pushing through, just make it happen. Just like,
mhm.
hey, like let's post, like what's the, it's
Yeah,
okay.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So I love that. Okay. Something else that fours are excellent at are kind of creating. I mean, we just mentioned it in the back of your backdrop. It's
Mhm.
creating this really comfortable, aesthetically pleasing environment. And I
Mhm.
know that you've had a co-working space. I also think that just kind of everything from like your graphics on an online that
Mhm.
online business, maybe onboarding process, whatever that might look like for you. Just curious how you see that in your business now.
Yeah, I'm so visual and I have very high standards on my visuals for my own business. And, love helping my clients elevate their visuals as well. I would have been an interior designer in another life or a house
Mhm.
flipper in another life. Space and then my mom did that for a living. So I grew up in that environment. I always just kind of thought that's why I was good at it because my mom did that and I was around that. But I think it might be a combo of my personality type and my environment. But yeah, if a space isn't pretty, I really struggle. I struggle focusing. I struggle creating. I struggle having ideas. And so my office is always one of the first things that I do. I moved into this house about 6 months ago, and the office was like, I was like, we got to get this office feeling good because I can't sit in a humdrum space. And it's also why the corporate world wasn't great for me because I would literally get headaches sitting in those boardrooms with fluorescent lights and your basic brown table and black chair kind of vibe. Like it just did not stimulate me enough. And I again did not recognize what was really going on at the time. And I probably even gave myself a little bit of a hard time about it, if I'm being honest. Like, why does it matter, Tiffany? Like,
Yeah.
don't be so bougie. But in reality, it's not bougie. It's just me. And it doesn't have to be this like extravagant, luxurious space. I'm also perfectly at ease on a beautiful, front porch, looking at some trees, looking at nature. Like it just needs to feel good for me is really what it boils down
Hmm.
to.
You are definitely not the first to talk about the corporate fluorescent lighting and just like
Really?
the beige walls. And yeah,
Oh,
I mean, I
it's
think for a lot of us, well, who wants that? But it can very much impact your energy, how you
yeah,
work.
yeah.
Something else that fours are so good at, and we'll never know, but they say Enneagram theory says that Steve Jobs might have been a type
A four.
4
Yep.
and just his vision. And that is very much a gift of a 4 is to have this vision for kind of what could be. How
Mhm.
do you see that showing up in the work that you do with a strong vision?
So, as a blessing and a curse, if I'm being honest, because while it might be easy at times to walk a path that someone else has already walked and create a business structure that already exists, I'm not going to be fired up about that. So even my membership, I built that to be this combo of, the education you'd expect from a mastermind, but we have monthly joy sessions that are like painting or flower arranging, or, we're all going to a row class in Nashville coming up soon to just move our bodies. So that dynamic of like, I want this to be unlike any other membership or mastermind I've seen. And I want to I want to grow our businesses and learn new business skills, but also I want to take care of ourselves and just ignite our creativity. So that's just one example, but it's a blessing and a curse because it means I'm always going to be paving my own path. It means I might not ever have anyone in front of me to really look at as an example of what is good and bad. I might have to learn some of those lessons on my own, but luckily I really don't have any problem with that. I'm really good at staying curious. I've gotten really good. I wasn't always, don't get me wrong. This is a lot of years of self-awareness work in the making, but now I'm really good at kind of like recognizing that me and my business, we're two different things. It's not a personal insult if something doesn't go well. So that staying curious thing really saves me.
So good. Okay. And then I'll do one more.
Mhm.
So fours tend to not really shy away from intensity, passion. They tend to have a lot of conviction for that vision. How have you seen that show up for you?
Ooh, yeah. Well, I would say as far as like the conviction and the passion, I would say how I've seen that show up in the sense that I've always been able to just leap. So that expression leap and the net will appear, right? I've always had no problems leaping, like jumping off the cliff, no problem, right? So that's probably how it's shown up for me the most, in the sense that like I have not overthought something. I have not let, worries cloud my ideas. I've really just run with it and trusted. I used to use the expression that I think of myself like a cat, like I'll always land on my feet, because that's just my experience has shown me that I'm not living on the streets, right? Like I'm not struggling to put food on the table. So in that sense, like I'm always going to land on my feet. I'm always going to figure it out. I'm always going to be willing to put the work into it. And I'm always going to have the resources around me to reach out my hand and say, hey, I'm struggling. I need some help. Doesn't mean I've never failed. It just means I know I've got enough people around me that nobody's going to let me really truly sink. And that's a blessing. Do not get me wrong, but that awareness has allowed me to say, okay, I'm going to run, I'm going to jump, I'm going to trust myself. And I'm also going to trust myself to know that if I'm drowning, I know to ask for help, and I'm going to ask for help. And that hasn't happened very often, but I mean, I'd be lying if I said I've never had to reach out a hand and ask someone for help. Of course I have,
Yeah, absolutely. And then I know I said that was gonna be the last one, but I do want to just mention this for any other people who might be resonating with this type 4 energy, that one of the other superpowers is this ability to sit with difficult feelings. Every other type on the Enneagram will tend to problem solve, reframe, positivity, silver lining it, right? And fours tend to just be like, yeah, that's really hard, or like that sucks. And like, how seen and heard would someone feel with that? And I told you earlier, I admitted that I was stalking you before the interview. And you had this reel about, with all these text messages from your clients, just like thanking you and sharing their wins. And I mean, I think that is such a testament of a really deep connection and meaningful relationship with your clients. So I just wanted to bring that up as well for anybody else, and just, notice, and I guess just see that in you. Anything else that you would share about the ability to sit with difficult emotions?
It's when you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And even like through years of therapy, my therapist, every therapist I've ever gone to has always said to me, you're really self-aware, and you're really calm. And I guess it's true, but I've done a lot of work. Again, I can't say that enough. I was not born this way. I've done a lot of work, and I'm still doing the work every day, doing the work. And really excited about the work, to be quite honest, which I don't know if that's the 4 or the 3 in me. I'm also a wing 3. So the achiever part comes out quite a bit. I'm like, no, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to keep growing. I'm going to keep evolving. But being able to be present and authentic and hold space for my clients is, it's what makes this feel so right for me. And for years, I dismissed the notion that I should be a business coach. So I mentioned it before, but I've had my own business coaches. I will always have my own business coaches. My first 2 business coaches I ever had both said to me, Tiffany, why aren't you a business coach? Like, I know you hired me, but like, everything you need, everything I'm telling you. And, knowing and being able to implement are 2 different things, first of all. But I kind of dismissed the notion when they would say that to me, because I just thought, oh, I'm still learning. I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm still learning. And so when I finally did decide this feels right, I'm ready for this, I'm ready to own this space and take up space as a business coach. What was really, really important to me was that I could do it in a way where I felt really authentic, and where my clients could feel seen and heard as a person and not just a business owner. And so, yeah, to, circle back around to that reel you were mentioning with the little text messages, like it makes me so happy to have these, like, sure, sometimes we're having really deep conversations. Sometimes they're sharing really big wins with me. And sometimes we're just talking about like the outfit they're going to wear to something and, the earrings they just put on or something silly. And it makes it so much more fun. And this journey should be fun. If it's not fun, we're doing it wrong, So yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to come back to just a couple of things in there in just a minute, but I also want to talk about sometimes the challenges. And I don't know if you have experienced this. So if you want to share a personal experience or if you want to share a client experience as an example, I don't ever want to call out our guests and make them open up their diary and tell us their deepest, darkest secrets, but we all have them, right? We all have these challenges. And so again, this isn't across the board, but those that identify as a type 4 tend to have some common challenges. One of those is really, and as a 7, I can relate to this too, is really being just kind of put off by anything mundane. So as a business owner, the accounting, the scheduling of the posts, like, I mean, there's so many mundane things. Like, it's just like, oh my God, I want to get out of bed and like be lit on fire and live my passion. But there's that, but then there's also the other things that have to happen. So have you seen that show up for yourself? And if so, what are some words of wisdom that you would have for those of us who do struggle? What tools, resources do you use to help get through those?
Yeah, absolutely. The accounting is not my forte. I cannot stand being in QuickBooks. And so I have an accountant. I have a CPA and an accountant, right? I have someone who's in there itemizing everything on a daily basis. I mean, on a weekly basis, really. And then I have a CPA who helps me with taxes. And in the beginning, I was kind of trying to do my own spreadsheets and my own QuickBooks, and I'll spare us the long story. If you ever want to know, just send me a DM and I'll tell you. But this would have been probably 2013, 2014. We're going way back in the archives here, but I had a learning lesson. I had a hard moment that I had to learn this lesson the hard way, where I was not regularly checking to make sure that the deposits I was making were actually showing up in my bank account. I was just assuming that QuickBooks and my bank were connected and everything was communicating and everything was going as planned. So probably 3 months had gone by and I went to log into my bank account and realized that this really large check from my handbag line had not entered my bank account. And I go into QuickBooks, and anyway, I get on the phone with QuickBooks and come to discover that they have deposited and been depositing my money for 3 months in a strange man's account in Arkansas. And it gets bad. Okay, this is why it was a hard lesson to learn, because at first the woman on the phone was like, oh yeah, I see that we've made a mistake. Let me try to draft this money back for you. She's like, I'll do it in small, for some reason she was going to do it in like multiple increments. So she did the first draft, and then the guy shut his account down. And then it became a legal battle, and QuickBooks quickly changed their tune and said, nope, this isn't on us. This is on you. You did this. You put this account in here, this man's Arkansas bank account. And I lost all that money. Okay. It was a hard and long battle and a hard lesson to learn and a hard pill to swallow. And my attorney was like, this is just going to cost you more money than you're going to get back out of it. So I think we should just call this a wash. So I lost all the money. And I realized very quickly that putting off the mundane tasks was costing me a lot of money. It would have been cheaper for me to just hire an accountant. And I've had an accountant ever since. So for me, the lesson is just like, if you're noticing that something isn't happening, especially if it's a real important thing to your business, like accounting, do not be afraid, and don't think of it as a sign of weakness to need to outsource. So one of the common misconceptions that I'm really trying to poke a hole in is this notion that we have to do everything ourselves and that everything is figure outable. I just think it's a dangerous, slippery slope. Okay. Because could you figure it out? Yes. But is it going to be forcing you to potentially kind of get out of alignment and not be your best self? Yes. So don't be afraid if something is really challenging, especially if it impacts the bottom line of your business. Do not be afraid to find someone to come in and help.
Such great advice. Such a good reminder. One of the other things that we can all struggle with as human beings, but fours sometimes tend to feel like they're like inherently defective. So
Mm,
ones and fours sometimes confuse one another because, or get mixed up because they really identify with that inner critic.
mm,
Whereas a one typically thinks if I can just do better,
mm,
I'll get there.
mm.
Whereas fours tend just to think, well, I'm just forever, like I'm just forever defective. There's something wrong with me. There's something missing. And I know, especially when you go out on your own, you're leading a team, you're leading clients, that can really be brought to light because you can compare yourself to everybody else. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with the comparison and feeling like, oh, I don't measure up. I'll never measure up. Like what
Mm.
have you had to do to kind of get to where you are now?
I really limit my input, if you will. I limit my exposure to um, people that could potentially cause me to feel that. So again, like if I'm on Instagram and I discover another business coach for creatives, I'm usually going to have one of two feelings. I'm either going to be like, look at her, she's awesome, or he's awesome, or they're awesome, and I want to be friends with that person. Or I'm self-aware, and I can admit that sometimes it might trigger me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I might look at them and think, oh, they are 15 steps ahead of me. And so, because I know that that doesn't help me, and they might actually be 15 steps ahead, they might also be 15 years ahead of me, right? I have become very aware of when it is okay to no longer follow someone or have someone, in my inbox if it's just going to create some triggers like that for me. So we've heard this all before. This is not new news. This is not new advice, but take control of what's coming in, especially as a four. Take control of what's coming in so that you can give yourself the space and the freedom to have the ideas, to dream, and to not let those distractions and that kind of like negative Nancy in your head potentially squash something that could be beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So good. And then this one kind of ties into that again. Not just a four can struggle with this, but this can be a core struggle for fours is is kind of taking things personally. And
Mm.
so when a client says no, or when somebody has a refund, or how do you deal with that type of situation?
Well, two ways. One is I still take it personally sometimes. And I have to just, consciously tell myself the new narrative that I know is true, which is that it's not personal. There could be a million things going on behind the scenes that I'll never be aware of, right? And also to know that I'm not for everyone is really freeing, but also a work in progress because I want to be for everyone. I want to help everyone, right? But I do recognize I'm not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. The second way that I kind of overcome that is I now have someone on my team that takes care of kind of like customer service type requests. So she's in charge of membership renewals and membership cancellations. She's in charge if anybody just needs anything. She's kind of in charge, and she's like front of the line for me. So she's a little bit of my shield, right? And all she does is tell me on a weekly basis, trends, here's what's going on. A lot, everyone renewed, everyone went, this person renewed, and here's what she said was her reason why. So she's kind of, filtering the information to me in a way that it feels safe for me to say, okay, I'm on a business call, I'm receiving this information from a business perspective. Did we gather the information we needed to gather to understand if this was a me thing or a her thing? And not me by me meaning our business, or her thing, right? Did we help her in all the ways that we needed to help her? Was she looking for something we didn't offer? Like data, curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she's my filter for that. And before I had her in place, it was really a bit of a roller coaster because I did find myself taking it personally or getting frustrated when I felt like I had described something adequately and someone still had questions, or, something along those lines. That's the mundaneness that I don't really
Yes.
love, right? So for me, it was about being able to take the leap and put someone on my team that I pay to kind of be my front line.
Okay, that is genius, Tiffany. Absolutely genius. And I think that so whatever that is, but just thinking about what are those potential triggers or could
Yep.
kind of set you off? And then how can you kind of work and navigate through that? Okay. I
Yeah.
have two more Enneagram questions before we start to wrap this up.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to talk well, and I do want to mention, so the 4 has a connection arrow to the type 1 and the type 2.
Mhm.
And I love, because earlier you mentioned how you have grown into asking for help
Mm.
and leaning more on people. And that is one area of growth that the 4 can tap into, is using that 2 energy of asking for help, getting in touch with that. And so I love that you're doing that. The other arrow is the 1, who could kind of be the polar opposite. Routine and structure and rules and guidelines. But it can be such a gift to the 4 to tap in, not to be a 1, but to bring in that 1 energy so that their ideas and vision can be brought to life.
Yep.
I'm curious, what is a routine, a structure, something you do every day, a tool you use that helps you tap into some of that 1 energy to be able to bring that vision to life?
Yeah. So organization is like essential for me to creatively thrive. So for us, for my team, we use a program called Asana, which is a project management tool. And we have a workflow for everything. And, I always think it's not good enough, but most people who come to work with me are like, oh my gosh, you're so organized. So I have to have that in place. I have to kind of be able to say, even my workspace, like my environment has to be pretty tidy and clean. I'm not your typical creative. A lot of creatives are like fine with clutter. That is not me. I am like, clean it up so that I can think, so that I can have ideas. If there's a mess, all I'm thinking about is the mess. And that's also because my dad was a neat freak growing up. And if you left something out, it got thrown away. So I learned that pretty quickly. But systems and workflows have really saved me. And I actually love them now. Like, I love sitting down and like polishing a workflow or creating that workflow and giving it to my team and being able to say, now here's how we do this. And it's easy and everyone knows what to do. And that clarity is just so key for me to be able to birth all these new ideas.
Okay. And then I know you mentioned you most identify with a wing 3.
Mm-hmm.
4s also have that 5, which again, kind of a lot of differences. Creativeness over here, and then the 5s are really focused on the data and analyzing and research and tend to be kind of more numbers. Again, this is stereotypes.
Yep.
But also very important as a leader, as a business owner. So what are I know obviously accounting, we have talked about the importance of diving into that data. Is there any other piece of data that you find really important to tap into, that you love to look into in your own business?
Yeah, we study our data. I study our data pretty regularly. One of the things I love looking at is our email analytics, because I'm proud to say we have grown our open rate to 44% on average. From last year, we were at 31. And so that's just like a random number if you're not into email analytics. But for an open rate, that's actually really high. And I've worked really hard at getting really creative with my subject lines and making sure that the content was really binge worthy so that we would see an increase in our open rate. So that kind of data excites me because it gives me, it gives me a little bit of a dopamine rush because I feel like I'm doing something right. We're trending in the right direction. It also gives me some pointers on what to keep doing or what to do more of. So we track that, email open rates, click rates, that sort of thing. We track website numbers and data. The only thing I don't really track on a data perspective, and honestly, it's just because time, if I'm being completely transparent, and also because it is the one number that I notice still triggers me a little bit, and that is Instagram. So I very rarely go in and look at my Instagram numbers from a perspective of like, how many followers did I lose? How many did I gain? I have never found that to be serving to me. I have never found that to empower me to do anything differently. I've only found that to feel like a gut punch. And so personally, for me, I just recognized that I'm just going to keep creating content that I like, and I'm still growing, right? So I'm not going to focus on who I'm losing, and I'm just going to trust that if I'm losing someone, it's because it wasn't a good fit and the people I'm gaining are the right fit. So that's the only doubt